We've released a lot of new features on this application over the past month, and so I thought that I would take some time to create a tutorial video to show you how to use all of this. I'll first start by walking you through how to create a project on Indexia, and then I'll demonstrate how to actually use the application once you have created a project and generated an initial index. So I'm going to start here by creating an index for Darwin's book on the origin of species. We can start here by inputting a title. My description will be somewhat rudimentary. And at that point, you can upload your PDF. It's worth noting here that at this stage in the process, we here at Indexia do not collect or store any data that you might have. You can upload this PDF and that will not go into any kind of a database that will be processed by AI. So at that point, you can make a decision on what page you would like to start indexing on. For instance, here, the first page on which actual text appears is, it seems, page 10. You can see here that we have this introduction, and so I will have that as the start page. The end page, meanwhile, is more than likely a bit behind this. You can see here that there is an index in this Project Gutenberg book itself. If we go to page 280, we will be at the very last page of the actual On the Origin of Species book. If you'd like, you can also include preamble pages, which have things such as Roman numerals as well. We're not going to do that for this index, however. Next up, you can determine the level of granularity that you would like to extract terms at. One important thing to note about this page is that if you have something really specific in mind for your index, for instance, maybe if you only really want to be collecting person names for it, you can specify the types of terms that you would like to collect here, and the AI system that we have will search for those terms. More than that, you can determine the level of detail that you would like for your index. The default level is what I would recommend, just in that our AI system can be pretty comprehensive. And you can also dictate whether you want subheadings to be generated for your index. Those are subterms that essentially get at the manner in which a primary term is used. For instance, in the book that I wrote, the term America was used frequently, but it was used in different ways. For instance, in one part of the book, we were looking at its economic capacity. In another part of the book, we were looking at its ability to impose sanctions, and so on. These subheader labels are meant to help readers identify those different components in your own book. Next up, you can review all of your inputted preferences. And then finally, at that stage, you can submit all of that, and our AI system will take care of the rest. The project has finished indexing, and so now I'm going to take this opportunity to walk you through exactly how the Indexia UI works. On the right-hand side here, you can see that we have an index viewer. That's basically an array of the terms that the AI has extracted in the manner of an actual index. And what's nice about this is that you can click on terms here and actually then be transported over to the term viewer associated with each of these terms. Now, the term viewer itself is helpful because it provides a lot more detail on how terms are being used in your index and exactly where they occur. Just to start here, you can see if you click this info button here, you'll be able to see a description of exactly how the term is being used in the book, which can be quite helpful for orienting you. If you open up the more detailed term viewer, moreover, you can actually see the pages on which the term occurs. And more than that, a brief description of exactly what is going on the page that you are looking at. If you want to, you can also click on the full text button here, and that can transport you to the actual raw text of the page, as well as providing a quick highlight of the term that you are looking at. There's also a lot of transparency built into this term viewer. For instance, I made the decision earlier to merge Aboriginal stocks into Aboriginal species. The AI suggested that I do so, and I thought that was reasonable. And you can see here that there's an alias now provided for this term that shows that it also includes the term Aboriginal stocks. You can also see that in the merge history tab here. The next really helpful thing associated with the term viewer is this similar terms functionality here. And the idea of this is that our AI system can take a term that you are looking at and look at in turn all of the other terms in the index and determine what the most similar terms are to the one that you're looking at right now. For instance, this AI system has determined that species, parent species, domestic productions, and so on are all similar to the term Aboriginal species, which is actually quite on the money. And once we have all of that in mind, we can then start to take actions on these different terms as we move toward a finalized index. For instance, we might want to find a manner to cross-reference the term Aboriginal species with species overall. And so I'm just going to hit this add cross-reference button here. You can see that that pulls up this menu here, and then we can click species and add that as a cross-reference. You can also see that very shortly this Aboriginal species entry here is going to update and include the term species as a cross-reference. You can now see that right here. There are some other actions that we can perform using the term viewer that are really helpful for getting an index into shipshape. In addition to cross-referencing, you can merge terms together when they appear to be duplicative, and you can also create sub-entries. And so I'm just going to go ahead and demonstrate how that works right now. For instance, we have this term here, Africa. If we want to create a referential sub-entry, we can take Africa, and then lo and behold, it's already identified that Abyssinia, which corresponds to Ethiopia, is a similar term to it. And I'm now going to go ahead and make Abyssinia a sub-entry of Africa. That's done. Now, another helpful feature that we have here is the bulk actions panel that you can access right here. And the idea of this is that with the number of terms that are in an index, it's often helpful to be able to make a decision to merge multiple terms at once into a primary term, or to do the exact same thing with sub-entries or the same thing with deletions. And I'll just very quickly demonstrate that. I see this term alpine rodents here. I bet that's similar to maybe a primary term like rodents. And so I will merge alpine rodents into rodents itself. Thankfully, I already don't really see that many other terms that are all that similar to either rodents or alpine rodents. For example, mammal should probably be a cross-reference to that at most. And so I'll just go ahead and use this bulk merge feature to merge these two terms as well, but rest assured that you could select many more to perform that merge if you were to want to. And what this will do basically will be to remove the term alpine rodents and then associate the mention for alpine rodents on page 224 with the term rodents itself. All right. The other features that I want to demonstrate here are as follows. One is the trim terms feature that we have. The idea of this is that it's sometimes a bit overwhelming to have as many terms as our indexing software initially collects. We try to err on the side of being comprehensive because I think it is easier to delete terms than it is to add them back later on. But if you are interested in deleting terms, you can use this trim index feature here to basically have an AI system that is armed with the context of the entire book, essentially decide which terms are the most important to the index and which terms are the least important to the index. And by simply clicking Analyze and Suggest here, the system will take a few moments to basically target the 131, in this case, terms that it thinks should be deleted. And you can then yourself go ahead and review those terms and select any terms that you might not want to delete. But if you don't choose to select them and simply press enter, the AI system will delete those terms for you and you can have a substantially trimmed index. This is a really helpful way to basically have some economy in your indexing. Now, if you have any doubts about the terms that are being deleted, you can use this restore deleted button here to basically look at the terms that have already been deleted from your index and re-add them if that is of interest to you. Maybe, for example, I want to add in the term hexagonal prisms, which I made the decision to delete. Now, it wouldn't be very difficult for me to add that back in by simply pressing this restore button here. Granted, I probably don't want that term in my final index, but I'm only showing that just to give you some context on how exactly that looks. And if we were to go ahead and search now for hexagonal prisms, lo and behold, you can see here that it exists now as a sub-entry to the term hexagonal. We also have the option to view the whole of the text of your book. This option here basically functions as a kind of Adobe PDF viewer where you can search for terms on any given page of your book and also search for terms as they appear across pages. For example, maybe I'm interested in the beagle. You can see here that it's now being highlighted on this page, and I can just click this arrow here to go to the next page on which the beagle occurs, which is page 214 of the book. This is a great way to help determine whether there are any terms that you might want to add into your index, which you can do through this manual term addition function here, where basically if you type in a single term, our AI system will go ahead and identify all the pages on which that term appears, summarize how that term is being used, and then in turn associate the term in question with other terms, basically deciding how similar it is to existing terms in the book and in the index, and that then can allow you to take actions on it, as I've already demonstrated. The group viewer is another feature that I want to talk a bit about. You can see here that we basically have our AI system looking at the terms that happen to be similar to one another and then grouping them together. And this is quite handy in that you can basically quickly identify, without having to do any work yourself, which terms are just inherently kind of similar to one another and may need to be cross-referenced, deduplicated, or simply left intact. And you have a lot of flexibility over how to create these groups. Right now, for example, I'm creating these groups at a very high level of similarity, so only terms that are truly synonymous are getting associated with one another. But I could choose to set that to just a high level of similarity, which, as it's recomputing now, is going to create much larger groups. While we're waiting for that to occur, I also want to talk about the index and concordance viewers that we have here on this application. Now, basically what that means is that in an index viewer itself, we are just looking at the most important page numbers associated with terms. Those pages where an AI identified a term and basically said, this is a very important term to this page. This gets at a lot of the term's meaning. And it really only shows a more limited number of pages associated with a set of terms. The concordance viewer, on the other hand, is much more comprehensive. That viewer basically shows all of the pages that are associated with a term. And you can choose to either look at your index in a concordance view or an index view using this menu right here. You can see here that when I switch over to the concordance view, there are many more page numbers. That makes a lot of sense. If I switch back to the index view, there are many fewer, which really only get at the most important page numbers for a given term. It's also worth noting that when you choose to export your index, whether you are in concordance or index view matters, because the export will only include the page numbers associated with one or the other view, depending on which one that you're in at the moment that you choose to export. Which brings me in turn to the export functionality that we have on this application. You can export your index whenever you want to. There are no restrictions on the number of times that you actually can export an index, and you can do that through exporting it to a docx file, exporting it to a more standard indexing format that is compatible with a software like Syndex, for example, or exporting it to a .rtf. And what's kind of nice about this system is that you actually have the ability to really specify the formatting for your exported index upfront. For instance, you can choose whether you want parent terms to be bolded or page numbers to be italicized, and so on and so forth. You can also do a single column index or a two column index, depending on what your preferences are. So I will export this out to Word right now just so you can see the final result. But this is really very easy to do, and you can do this really at any point. This is the final index for on the origin of species, as you can see, the one that's been exported out to Microsoft Word. You also have the ability, if you want to make indexes public. We found this to be very helpful for large documents and for researchers who are trying to parse through large documents, in that you can basically make the Indexia UI that you can see here viewable through a public link. When you make the index public, it becomes uneditable. It's stored at a stable URL, and then people can go ahead and look through it without any risk of it being modified, and also take advantage of the massive amount of information that we're able to collect on exactly how terms are being used all throughout a work. It's basically a really powerful version of like seeing something in Adobe PDF where you can really understand all the exact context and meaning behind the terms and concepts that you happen to be looking for. Now, the very last thing that I think would be helpful to discuss is the fact that we automatically generate sub-entries for terms. And the reason that we do that is that when terms appear quite frequently, for instance, this term modification here, it can be kind of helpful to understand the different contexts in which these terms are being used. And so you have the ability to generate through this button here contextual sub-entries. In essence, the AI will look at how that term is being used. It will generate labels that correspond to the different usages of the term, and then it will intelligently assign those labels to the different pages on which that term appears. It's a really great way to label all of the different terms, or rather all of the different pages on which a term appears, such that in an organized manner, someone who's reading your book can quickly identify the exact usages that they want to see of your term in your index. It's a very big time saver, I found. And you also have the ability to specify custom instructions when you are generating these labels through this feature here. For instance, with a term like natural selection or modification, you might want to say that you're interested in sub-entries that correspond to the specific species that are undergoing natural selection, as discussed in On the Origin of Species. And you can then have the AI system look at how the term is being used and actually create labels that really correspond to that request that you have. Okay, well, that's all that I have for this round of features on Indexia. We're very excited about all the progress that we've made, and we can't wait to see what you're able to do with it. Thanks.